Kenya Crafts presents Ahsoka Tano belt with leathers. One thing that I had always regretted about my Ahsoka Tano cosplay is the fact that I never got a chance to finish her belt and leathers. With 2020 Planet Comic Con canceled, I've decided to use the extra time to add to my favorite cosplay. Okay, so the first thing we are doing is this is a new technique that I'm trying. I took some of the plastic coat that you can buy in a spray can. They also have a kind that you can paint on. I use the aerosol version. And so I am giving all these pieces of foam that I have pre-cut to 2 inches, a coat of this plastic coat. I'm also using the plastic coat on the bust breastplate that I'm making. So this is another part of the technique. I have lit these dry for about 20 minutes, and then I came back and made a big wad of aluminum foil into a ball, and I just kind of rocked it back and forth. So here I am putting my first coat of paint here on the breastplate, which is another part that I had not gotten done on my Ahsoka Tano cosplay. So I actually ended up doing 3 coats of paint on this. So this is the first one. I put the plastic coat on this part. I was trying to give it a little bit more stiffness. It really didn't add that much effect, and I don't know that I would put it on the next time. And I'm using a rich brown for my first coat here on the belt. As I said, I cut them all to 2 inches each ahead of time. And I'll be honest, I wasn't sure if I was going to like this at first. So, uh, but after a couple coats of paint, I was very happy with the results. Again, the breastplate part, I don't know that I would necessarily waste my time to do the plastic coat. It really didn't seem to add much value. I wanted to make it a little bit more stiff, but and maybe if I would have been more generous, it would have had more effect. I didn't want to just waste it since this was the first time I was working with it. All right, that was the second coat. Now I'm going over the top of the belt again with espresso to darken it up. It was still showing through pretty lightly with the lighter brown that I had used the first time. I also just kept dabbing my paintbrush in just a little bit of water. I didn't really want to thin out so much the paint as just, I mean, I thinned it out a little, but that it just helped. Here is the third coat of paint on the breastplate. On this coat, I went the opposite direction to help smooth out brush strokes that had been left in before. All right, so now we are going to start working on the rest of the belt. I've got a cutting mat here, and it is marked out with the measurements. And so it's a 2 inch belt, and I'm cutting a half an inch approximately off each side there, making measurements to make them all match. I actually only am doing 2 right now because that's what we're doing. mark it down further. And then I'm kind of cutting it and rounding it off so that it'll fold around the ring better. All right, checking it out. Always kind of check and see if you like the way it lays before you affix it. And that way you have the option of being able to fix something versus just being stuck. All right, so I just used a large thumbtack to poke the hole so that I wouldn't have to push so hard to get the brad through. Again, I'm just using some brass brads, and once you poke them through it, and I'm wrapping it around to give it a little bit more strength there, and it looks just like a rivet. All right, so and you see she has the parts that hang down. So I'm just taking another one of the strips and cutting it all individually. All right. Now it wasn't quite long enough, so I took the fourth piece and I cut it in half, and that's actually going to give me a little bit more than I need, but that's okay. With clothes, you'd rather have them a little bit big and then have them too small. So now I'm just sewing them together using my sewing machine. And as you can see, I just used the paper clip thing, and on the back end, I am just going to attach some Velcro. Uh, in general, we try to put it to where the soft part is facing towards you. And that way, if for whatever reason it's pokey, you get poked by soft stuff instead of pokey Velcro. Just, a tip. All right, and see we have that there, and trim off the excess threads. All right, and then she's got a back part on the back of the belt, and we're going to use that to hide where we sewed on the Velcro. So I just kind of kept cutting a rough shape, and when I got it close, I folded it in half so it would be more equal, and then it was a little long, so I shortened it up and rounded it back off again. Now I just took some bronze paint and painted over this a couple of coats. And here we are working on the leathers that hang down. I can only imagine that these are not really for decoration, that this is some sort of armor. Curse you, paper clips. All right, and had I been thinking, I would have cut this completely different before. I would have cut it so I would have saved the sides from cutting it away, so it would have all matched perfectly instead of having to make a new one after I had already done it. So, and then so then you have to trim everything up and make sure everything matches. So, mistakes were made. It's okay. Live and learn. See, this is why I do these videos, so you can learn from my mistakes and have an easier time when you do it. I know that the first time we really worked with foam was my Ahsoka headdress. And so here I'm just painting a little bit of craft glue on and attaching it to a back piece. Um, I think it kind of looks like the elephant guy from Java's Palace. I am not an elephant. His hit song. Um, but we have learned so much. The first time we did work with it was Ahsoka's headdress, and I I bet you it took us 40 hours. But that includes several trips to Joanne's Fabrics and learning about walking feet and all kinds of things. So here I had thought about taking another piece of foam and making an entire outline. And I just decided that that would be kind of wasteful. So I decided to do it, and I'm just taking pewter gray paint with a thin, stiff, flat brush, and I am just, again, barely putting it in the paint and then barely applying pressure, just very gently, uh, allowing my hand or at minimum like my pinky to rest on the table and be a kind of a guide. Um, and it just takes a little practice, but if you maybe take a piece of paper or some cardboard and just practice this technique along the side, it's really not that hard and you come up with a pretty clean edge. I did not make you sit through all three of the coats of paint that I did on this particular edge. Um, However, that is how many coats I ended up putting on this. And if you have something to be able to wipe it away and do an edge really fast, it will just kind of scratch off quickly. I ended up putting just a couple of marks in it while I was going through the different coatings. And so here I am taking, you can't really see it, so I didn't include it, but I did go through and trace with a pencil what I wanted the pattern to look like. I pulled out the picture and I looked at it, and I can't quite see in some of the pictures all the different angles. So, on the parts that I couldn't see, I just tried to copy some of what I could see as best as I could. So, I'm using a very similar technique as what I did with the side. I am just barely dipping the tip of my pen, or not my pen, of my paintbrush into the paint and just barely applying any pressure. And you just have to be very patient. So here where I'm adding extra things that may or may not be on Ahsoka's patterns. I am actually covering up mistakes that I made where I dabbed bits of the gray paint on with my hand. So, just kind of Bob Rossing it. No mistakes, only happy accidents. I thought it actually added to the look. So, and it gives my own artistic license. On this particular thing, I did apply 2 coats. It didn't take near as long as the edge. If you have really nice fine tip markers and are good with markers, that may be another choice that you could use as opposed to paints. You can see where I get more confident slash impatient. So there was actually a smudge on one of them from pencil markings, and truthfully, you really can't see it now with all the paint. It was very light to begin with. If I think it shows up, I may take just a damp cloth or paper towel and just very carefully rub around there. All right, so we are sewing the other parts and pieces on and adding them to the belt itself. Um, and we'll just use a brad to attach that to there. Do, do, do. And I wanted to reinforce the Velcro, so I just put a little hot glue on the back there. I didn't want it to start pulling through. Now I am attaching this part. I'm going to sew this on here. If you have any suggestions about my sewing techniques, please let me know. I am still learning. So, oh, if you are sewing foam, you need to do two things. Number one, you need to have what's called a walking foot. And number two, I use the leather uh, needles because otherwise you break them. All right, just adding a few more brads there, and then taking craft glue and a paintbrush. If you use a nice paintbrush, please, 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 please do not wait any time at all before you go and clean it out. So, thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. This craft had me super nervous, and I'm so proud of what I accomplished. Show me your cosplay creations. Like and subscribe. I'll see you next week, crafters.